So I think I have to do something about my brand image. Because every time I get introduced as a supply chain guy. But, but more and more I'm realizing that supply chain is actually the whole enterprise, right? And there are a few things that we'll talk about, and hopefully you'll also realize that, when we are thinking of a term like supply chain, it actually cuts across the entire value chain. Yeah. So the topic is around risk and resilience. And my name is Kaushik Ghatak, and I'm an advisor with Ecosystem. I've been in the technology sector and the supply chain sector for quite some time. You can see from my, no hair situation that I have put in my time in this industry. So when we, and also, having been in industry for quite some time, I have been also witness to so many risk and resilience scenarios, right? So risk and resilience is nothing new for enterprises and supply chains. Because right from age immemorial, but I've just given some instances of 2001, a small fire broke out in a clean room in a Philips semiconductor manufacturing in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And because of that, two major customers, Nokia and Ericsson, the way Nokia handled and the way Ericsson handled were completely different. And that one incident got Ericsson out of the mobile phone industry altogether. So how you perceive risk and how you take mitigating actions and build resilience is extremely key. Boeing delivery, you know of. 2011 was a watershed year for risk and resilience. Two things happened. Fukushima in Japan, the semiconductor industry got impacted, and the Thailand floods. And only then we all realized that, hey, we are so much dependent on hard disks from Thailand, right? But then the pandemic was an overdose, right? We had the black swans coming from all sides, and so disruptions across the world, in apparel, in retail, the auto industry, semiconductor, I'm sure all of you have heard of, right? And so around 2022, we're thinking that, okay, so now, middle of 2022, now it's more in control, the vaccine is in place, people have got booster doses, and we have seen maybe only the end, the tail of this disruption. But as if that was not enough, we had the Ukraine war going on, we had the recession coming, the interest rates going up, and with the impact on supply chains and enterprises, right? So facing disruptions, as Pete mentioned, we will continue to face disruptions, right? So that is not going to be new. But what would distinguish us from the rest is how we perceive that risk and how we bounce back. And that's what my definition for resilience is, right? So just to mention that this is not a new topic, this gentleman, Yossi Sheffi, he's an MIT professor. He wrote a book in 2005 called The Resilient Enterprise. Fantastic book. And he literally drew out the cycle that companies would go, that as you are facing a disruptive event, do you have early warnings? If you have better early warnings, you'll be able to take mitigating actions faster. Then it hits you, and then there is a delayed impact and the full impact, and then hopefully you bounce back, right? So the whole ability of how short you can make this disruptive cycle distinguishes leaders from laggards, right? And what I'm going to do is take you through a very well-known company who, and talk about how they approached the COVID scenario and what they how they handled that risk. Zara, all of you know Zara. And we also know how much apparel industry got, impacted, right? So at the beginning of, the COVID as it struck, 88% of stores closed during first quarter 2020. 88%, and we know that Zara is primarily through exclusive retail shops, right? 88% of the stores closed. They reported a loss of sales drop of 44%. So if I'm selling mainly through physical stores, and if those stores are closed, so customers cannot come in, what would happen to inventory? All the stock that is lying around? Will it go up or go down? It goes up, right? So let's see what happened for Zara. When 88% of stores were closed and sales were down 44%, their inventory actually went down by 10%. That's a good response, right? It's a good response for resilience. How did they do it? So actually the foundation for handling such disruptions, Zara had been, not preparing for disruptions, but Zara's entire business model was, and the capabilities it built over the years helped them do it when this disruption came. So since 2009, they have been on a big push towards putting RFID tags on each of their, stock keeping units, right? The clothes that we buy. And they could recycle it about, it used to cost about 18 cents, and they could recycle it 10 times. So you see, per item, the RFID tag would be very low cost, right? But over the last, since COVID hit, 11 years, they have built such capability that they had exact view of exactly which items are there in which store at what point of time. Extremely strong real-time visibility, and Zara used to use that visibility to understand the consumption patterns, and because they're in the fast fashion, so they would understand their stores were completely tied in with their design and merchandising and manufacturing, and they could turn around new designs faster and faster, right? So they were using the RFID capabilities and visibility for that purpose. But what happened when COVID struck? Zara could support 50% growth in online sales because now they had visibility of all the items that are there in the stores. So when customers were ordering through online sales, they didn't have to send new inventory into the customers separately. They could direct the inventory that is lying in their stores, in their store's warehouse, and they could send it to the customers. It looks simple, right? And it was a huge, in April 2020, online sales grew by 95%, where the overall sales declined by 44%. So to me, this was a perfect example of resilience, bouncing back. But then there are two lessons that I take away from this story. A, visibility is important. Visibility gives you an early warning of what risks could be coming, and visibility also lets you take corrective actions much faster. And B, you cannot be reactive and plan for disruptions and build resilience in the hope that when disruption happens, I will be able to manage it. This capability of Zara was built long back, not to manage disruptions, but they could sense the power of visibility in their supply chain. And when the disruption actually happened, they could utilize this foundation, the foundational capability, for a different purpose. So you have to be prepared and be a leader in terms of building up capabilities. That was the second lesson I got. So the other interesting thing that I came across a study done by McKinsey, And it was a very interesting study where they asked, in May 2020, they asked companies across many industries that, hey, now that this has hit, what are you planning to do? How do you manage such risks and resilience in the future? And then they went back and asked, after 1 year, in June 2021, okay, so you had planned this, how much of it did you actually implement? And a very interesting picture emerges. So it was all about dual sourcing, increasing inventory of critical products, nearshoring and increasing supplier base. We had seen a lot of those talks going on, right? Regionalizing the supply chain, so coming from global to more local, reducing SKUs, make it simple, don't sell so much so that you'll reduce the complexity in your value chain. Increasing inventory along the supply chain, just go ahead and increase inventory so that you have that buffer. So whenever there is a loss in supply, you can manage with inventory. Expanding backup production sites, nearshoring production, and so on and so forth. So actually, if you look at the pattern of what companies achieved during a 1-year period, was mainly around inventory. Because that's a band-aid. You see, it's easy to throw inventory at the problem. There is a supply disruption, let me order more, and let me place in more and more inventory. That's a band-aid. But that's not a intervention that will have long-term impact. But again, I'm probably being too judgmental of this. You see, they have also done other things. And the fact is also that building inventory is easy, and doing nearshoring of production is much more difficult. So they would probably, if you take the poll now, probably the picture will look slightly different. But the point is that you cannot be reactive to disruptions. Yeah. So then my thought was that, okay, what are those foundational capabilities? And there are many, right? And I'll stick to the example that I can think of from the digital technologies world. So, it's a classic. Actually, there's a reason why I'm branded as supply chain, because whenever I put the value chain in pictures, I do it as a supply chain, right? So I'm responsible for how I'm perceived. But you see, in a supply chain, we have the material flows, physical goods moving from the suppliers to manufacturers to the distributors to retailers. And while most of the material flows goes from left to right, of course, there are returns and it can go from right to left also. The financial flows actually go from right to left, right? Because the customers pay us, we pay the suppliers, and so on and so forth, right? But the underlying flow that helps us manage this whole material and financial flow is the information flow. And I personally believe that right now we are at the cusp of huge transformational capability with the digital technologies that we have to manage our information flows much, much better. Let me give you an example. So why am I saying that we have this transformational capability? I have been in the technology field since 1990s. So I've seen over the last 33 years how technology has developed, right? In order to get a very strong visibility of, the way digital technologies will help is, it will help us sense faster, it will help us analyze faster, and it will help us respond faster, right? If I can get these three done very well, then I can respond faster. What has happened over the last 10 years, actually, is there has been phenomenal improvements in terms of making the physical equipment, the goods that we are doing much smarter. So they can sense, they can send us information. We also have the capability, they're so smart, we also have the capability for them to act. We can give them instructions and they can act, right? So huge improvements in this area. But what good is the data coming from them unless we can bring it through our network and feed it to the computers who will analyze it, right? And that's where the communication revolution has happened, right? 5G, and now we're talking 6G and so on and so forth, right? So our pipes have become bigger and bigger, and it can get much bigger data volume, velocity, veracity, and all that. But then with all that, unless our computers were really good in terms of processing, you would not be able to manage such data. And that's what has happened with in-memory computing and the other big data bases and so on and so forth, right? So as a personal example, I have been in the area of enterprise planning and supply chain planning for a long time. And planning models, the software, because of the complexity, it takes a lot of time to run. And in one of my first projects back in 98, 99, where we're doing a complete demand planning and supply planning work for one of the HP subsidiaries, the demand planning software used to take 22 hours to run. Then we feed it into the supply planning, it will take another 26 hours to run. And we could not run it during the transaction, the weekdays, because if you run both programs together, it will slow down the transaction so much that you'll not be able to do the transactions. So we had to run it over the weekend, but then you can understand it will not complete within the weekend, so we're always late in terms of the recommendations, right? The same model, similar model, now can be run in 15 minutes. Our computers are so fast, which has given rise to the holy grail that we have always been looking at. Bringing together these three very disparate worlds that we grew up when we entered technology. The information technology world of ERPs and other business applications, right? And the operational technology world of machines. The machines were smart, but they were in their own island. And it was very difficult for us to get the information here. And the other silo was the engineering side. CAD/CAM, huge databases. It was very difficult to transfer and look and analyze. But now with these three coming together, and this is the crux of Industry 4.0, right? With these three coming together, now the potential is huge. Because now you can, I've worked in the automotive industry, and if my initial days, and any design problem in the car that we would introduce, by the time we understand the design problem, from the warranty cards that are getting filled up and coming to the service and then floating into the manufacturing design side will take months. But now it can happen in minutes. So this is what is giving rise to, and there are a lot of hype words, self-healing supply chains and autonomous supply chains. So don't go with the hype, but think of the possibilities. And think of, from a risk and resilience perspective, how much control now you have on actual data on the ground and your ability to sense, analyze, and respond. So what kind of work we do and how do we help? Pete showed the 4 categories of work that we do: aim well, plan well, buy well, and implement well. And so we can help in terms of engaging across this whole category of tasks that companies would need to execute to manage their transformation plans. Chris has shown me the time, so I think I'll stop here. And so your 21st century partner, and thank you.
Thank you.